The story begins with someone saying, "They never imagined it would take 17 years to return to Korea." In 2 containers names were displayed. Pu Jun-yu and Suyop Jin looking at the vases. A man says it's been a long time since he last saw his father and mother. In his thoughts he admits, there was a time he wondered how much a human life was worth. 17 years ago, 10:32 p.m. in the Gulf of Aden. Cruise ship begins to sink. The boy was extremely desperate as he looked around for his parents. The storm was growing more intense by the second. The child kept screaming, searching for his relatives. He tried to swim against the strong sea currents. At that moment, the boy notices 2 bodies floating. Getting closer, Dongwoo realizes it's his mother. Looking closer at the body, the boy notices there are various wounds scattered across it. Frozen, he's left paralyzed, unsure of what to do in that situation. Even so, the child keeps trying to wake her. However, a large wave comes toward them, causing the protagonist to start drowning. Desperate, the boy realizes he needs to get to the surface before he runs out of air. Opening his eyes, he sees several bodies scattered beneath the ship, growing more and more shocked by the entire scene, realizing even his secretary had been shot to death, along with the head chef, the captain, and the ship's bodyguard. Suddenly, he sees a body nearby and realizes something horrifying. After all, sinking further and further before him were both his father and mother. But suddenly someone pulls him up. An old man asks if Taha is okay. Seeing the boy is still alive, the man asks if he can move. Crying, he's overwhelmed with joy to see his grandfather is still there. Suko says, "It seems the heavens haven't completely abandoned them." The protagonist tells him that his parents are below them, but his grandfather says he knows there's nothing they can do. He asked his grandson never to forget the words he's about to say, declaring that no matter what, the boy must inherit the Chingu group. With that, the old man hands Tiha a pen, tells him that by bringing it to Lawyer Kim, the man will automatically know how to help him. He also must remember not to trust anyone, and return to Korea as quickly as possible to meet the lawyer. Even so, the protagonist begs his grandfather to at least save his father and mother. The man begins removing his life vest. The boy doesn't understand what he intends to do with it. Surprisingly, the old man puts the vest on the child, explaining that they had already been shot before the ship even sank. Inflating the vest, Suko tells Taha to go and survive at all costs, and so the man pushes his grandson away. Just as another giant wave approaches them, the storm caused lightning to tear through the clouds, non-stop. After some time, all the chaos turned into an agonizingly peaceful silence. The boy was still floating on the water, opening his eyes, clearly exhausted. The boy is left speechless when he notices something casting a shadow amidst the sunny sky. The source was a large cargo ship passing through the area. Someone smiles as their face is obscured by the light. Taha was very scared and confused. After being rescued, 2 guards, armed with rifles, were shocked to see the child still alive. One of them starts yelling for his boss, saying the boy is okay. Hearing a language different from his own, the protagonist realizes they're Italian. The man kept trying to communicate with his superior. Someone seems to give a call, while one of them complains about their boss being there again. The chubby one asks if the child can understand him. However, Taehan notices a tattoo standing out on the man's neck. The fact the protagonist realizes that, given the tattoo and the weapons, these people aren't ordinary. Suddenly, the group's leader jumps down from where she was. Startling him, the woman lands in front of the boy, asking how he ended up on her ship. Her subordinate warns that the child might not speak her language. Annoyed, she orders someone to bring a translator to help them communicate. I just watches them, a little nervous, not knowing how to react. But to the woman's surprise, he speaks in Italian, saying he was on a yacht that got attacked nearby. With that, she asks where this impressive child came from. He explains that he's Korean and that during a storm, his family's ship was invaded by armed men, who killed his parents and grandfather. The boss says that apparently after being shipwrecked, he ended up on the Salerno family's ship. Confused, the boy wonders what the Salerno family is. He starts laughing at the situation. As an Asian kid speaking Italian, claims to have come from the Gulf of Aden, in the Middle East, pulling out a knife. The woman says it's shameful, but she can't believe it, pointing the blade at the boy. Reginette asks if there's any reason she shouldn't just throw him back into the sea. The boy doesn't know what to say to avoid that. Nervous, he tries to think of something as fast as he can. So Tang shows the pen given to him by his grandfather, explaining that he's the grandson of Suko, president of the Qinghu Group, the son of Suyak Suko's third son and Matt. Because of that, instead of tossing him overboard, they could help him get in touch with his people and reap some benefits. Annoyed, Regiment asks if he's really talking about the Qinghu Group. She notices that this is the most successful conglomerate in South Korea, and apparently that brat is part of the family. Because of that, the leader orders her subordinates to check the news related to Korea, while both of them search for something related to what the boy said. The woman asks if the child speaks any other languages, informs them that he speaks Cantonese, English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, Hindi, and Esperanto, claiming to be fluent enough for basic conversations. One of the men says he found some news from Korea. Regina smiles, realizing that this is fascinating. She says that if the boy wants to contact someone from Korea, he can ask them. But the boy remembers what his grandfather had said, telling him to look for Lawyer Kim, since the man would know how to help him. The protagonist states that he needs her to contact someone outside of his family in Seoul. At 1 a.m. someone answers the phone asking who it is. The person says they're calling from abroad, notifying that they will only speak in English, asking if he's Lawyer Kim. Regina says that from the photo she sent, the lawyer must have realized she has the precious grandson in the group with her, asking if she should send him back to Korea. However, the old man questions what she means by that. She makes an offer of $10 million, saying they should meet in the Panama Canal for the exchange. However, the guy claims he's too busy to negotiate, so he makes a counter offer, offering $1 million. Putting his drink down on the table, he picks up a microphone that was nearby, swearing and stating there'll be $1 million, while dancing with some people. The man says he'll pay $1 million if she kills Taya, ordering the woman to kill the boy and send him video proof within the next 5 minutes. Should receive the $1 million as a reward. Regina asks what would happen if he didn't send her the money after the deed while everyone watches. The lawyer assures her that he only needs to tap his phone 3 times to send such a small amount. Besides that, if she doesn't do it, Kim says he'll reveal to the press that they were responsible for the attacks. Ending the call, he tells his superior that there's no need to worry, as he's contacted some mercenaries close to them. Thanks to that, the Qinghu Group now belongs entirely to them. The boy was still paralyzed by everything he had heard. After all, that man wants him dead within the next 5 minutes, making him even more frightened. The woman says that apparently, that's just how things work. Because of that, her reason for keeping him alive is gone. Terrified, Taya starts begging them not to kill him, but Regina claims that he's no longer a member of a wealthy family. Besides, they're probably already preparing his funeral, asking if the boy knows what that means. Claiming that this is quite common in her world. People kill others to take their assets and achievements. Horrified, he complains about why his uncles and relatives are planning to kill his entire family. Both guards talk among themselves, saying that their boss won't kill him, even though she's having fun provoking him. Trembling, he can't believe he survived the sea, only to die at the hands of people he doesn't even know. Wondering what Cheung-ho really means, and if it was worth killing his parents and grandfather for the positions they held. Suddenly, Someone enters the room saying they're under attack. The guy informs them that 3 patrol ships and a heavily armed military helicopter have appeared. She asks if it's Interpol, but the man says no and explains that they're ignoring all radio transmissions. Regina doesn't understand what's going on. After all, it would have to be someone crazy to do something like that. Looking at the child, she finally understands the culprit, realizing that those Koreans must have contacted those people to find that boy out of nowhere. Take stabs his right hand with a pen. No one understands what the child is trying to do. He says that the Chingu group will never give her the money. Furthermore, the woman has nothing to gain from killing him. The Salerno family's trade leader is surprised to see the boy's reasoning. The protagonist begs to join them, claiming he will be loyal for the rest of his life if they help him get revenge. The woman wonders how he learned the Salerno insignia. The crazy woman starts laughing, hysterically excited. Regina tells Matteo to get ready, because the show must begin. Before leaving, she asks if the boy understands the weight of his words, asking if he truly wants the power of revenge, even if it means staining his hands with blood. Remembering that his grandfather had said that, no matter the means, he must inherit Qiangu at all costs. Determined, the protagonist simply nods an affirmation with a smile. She says that barking dogs rarely bite. But even so, this was quite interesting. The crazy woman kicks the door open, telling them to follow her, claiming that from that point on, the boy's life belongs to the Salerno family, so he will live and die for them. Therefore, he must watch closely because that is his future. Ada truly observes, frozen by what he sees. With that, 17 years pass and he finally returns to Korea. The boy asks his father and mother to protect him. As he takes his revenge, however, he seems surprised by something. Quickly turning to look behind him, he jumps to the side as several shots hit the area. Several soldiers had arrived and fired many rounds at Taha. Getting out of some vehicles, someone asks if those insects don't even know how to aim. A Changhu group security guard and manager tells them to look for the senior administrative director, stating that he doesn't know the man, but he must be insane to think he could kidnap a chief. Who director, one of his subordinates, tells the manager that they found the car they were looking for. He tells everyone to be careful when opening the trunk, as the director is still alive, while ordering them to check his injuries.
À large explosion occure.
The guy gets angry at the audacity of placing a bomb there, but suddenly, half of his men have their heads decapitated. When he finally looks back, the rest of them are also killed. Extremely quickly, Taha had defeated them all in an instant. The man notices a small cut on his waist. Nervously, he sees that it was thanks to protective vests, trying to attack the protagonist. The bald man calls him a little insect. However, the boy tells him not to think. He's the only one with something to say. Quickly, he lands another strike on the back of his opponent, launching an attack that splits him in half. As he collapses, Jang wonders what that was, unable to understand how that man managed to do such a thing, complaining about who that monster really is. On the other hand, the protagonist didn't seem pleased by it. He begins to clean his daggers as he walks away, heading toward a luxury car, and grabbing a bag that was in the back seat. He then walks to the trunk, wincing. The director begs Tiha to let him go, claiming he was only following orders. This was the former lawyer Kim, the one who had ordered his death, stating that he had no reason to kill the chairman. However, the boy opens the bag and throws several bills on top of the man, saying that this is the 1 million. After all, that money probably was never delivered to him. Frightened, the man asks what money Taha is talking about. However, the director remembers that day. The protagonist takes a lighter from his coat, stating that thanks to the fact that he died that day. As he throws the lighter, he says he was reborn. With that, Kim begins to burn alive coldly. Taha just watches with indifference. After that, he calmly picks something up, putting the cigar in his mouth. The protagonist Mentally tries to speak to his parents and grandfather, apologizing for having taken so long, pleading with him not to worry and just to find peace, saying that from that day on, he will carry all their pain. After some time in the middle of the city, a modern building stood out among the others. The protagonist was moving quickly, determined to do something. Some men questioned where he thought he was going, as they prepared to shoot to stop him. However, the madman simply killed the two of them quickly. Even so, Taya didn't seem bothered by the setback. He continued walking calmly through the hall. Seeing the situation, a man sat on the floor, terrified by the scene, frightened. He asked the protagonist who had sent him there. The man said they were part of the Chingu group, claiming that he wouldn't be safe after doing all that. While cleaning his blade, Taina said that this was Holdings, a private security company subcontracted by Chingu. Its main function was protecting directors and board members outside of working hours all across the Gangbuk area. During your downtime, they stalked journalists or people who reported on Shingu. They kidnapped, assaulted, and even killed them. In other words, they were contract killers. The people that had been captured were completely devastated and desperate. The protagonist simply threw one of his daggers to the old man. After that, he told everyone to use it to free themselves and to make sure they never saw him there. So the bindings were cut. The three were still confused about everything that had happened. The old man got up and brought the knife back to the boy running. They thanked him as they left. On the other hand, the company member ordered everyone to come back. One of the escapees looked back. As he heard the man complaining, the fat man asked who he was, wondering if Taha was part of their family. Removing his mask, the boy said no one, explained that he just wanted to have a slightly more private conversation, saying that he needed the schedule of everyone on the board, from the directors to the president. The man said he didn't know, and even if he did, he wouldn't say. His family and himself would be dead if he did. The protagonist said it looked like he valued his life, stating that he start with his eye, and that when he felt ready, he should raise his hand in a building. A large screen outside displayed news about a celebrity. Meanwhile, several people sat on stairs, experiencing homelessness due to the heat. Even a cicada lay dead on the ground, breaking the silence of the place. Someone seemed to be in a hurry. As he walked, Taehan noticed that his cigar would draw too much attention, wondering if he should try Korean cigarettes. The avenue was very busy at that time. He said he had finally returned to Korea, and that so far everything seemed normal. But he noticed his country was going crazy, with various ads for loans and insurance being broadcast everywhere. A politician was giving a speech, claiming he would use his power and influence to eradicate the epidemic of crime and violence, declaring that from that day on, his war against crime would be publicly declared. However, his speech was interrupted by someone pointing a gun at him. It was said that in 1990, the president was killed during his campaign against organized crime. Since then, no one had opposed criminal groups, turning the country into a place consumed by violence and money. The boy walked the streets deep in thought. Thus, the Chien-Hu group allied with criminal organizations to bribe the media and suppress competitors. They invested in entertainment and sports, making the population lose interest in politics, so much so that even a dog could become a candidate. Even so, people kept saying that the Chingu Group was a company that benefited the people. Taeyong entered a store calmly. The clerk welcomed him. Both he and another guy asked for a pack of this. They stared at each other for a moment, unable to understand how such a coincidence could happen. A bit irritated, the protagonist decided to change his choice. However, they both had the same idea and asked for a plus at the same time. Once again, they looked at each other suspiciously. Awkwardly, the woman said that, unfortunately, they only had one pack left. Tata sighed deeply, clearly annoyed by the situation. As he left, he asked the clerk to give the pack to the other man, saying he'd be fine without it. The man kept staring as the boy walked away. After the man made his purchase, he found the protagonist outside, who politely asked for a cigarette. However, he asked if the boy couldn't go to another convenience store. Teva explained that it had been a long time since he was last in Korea, so he wanted to try it quickly. The guy gave up trying to avoid him as he handed over a cigarette. He said he couldn't believe someone wanted to try that tasteless thing. As they walked, the man said he'd get a fine if he smoked there, so he recommended waiting until reaching a smoking area. Observing him, I had admitted that when you've been in the mafia for about 17 years, a simple glance is enough to assess a person. Assuming that guy was strong, just as strong as the ones he faced abroad. He wondered if people like that were common in Korea. Also leaving, the protagonist declared he hoped not to meet him again, where the protagonist had committed the massacre. While smoking, he calmly observed one of the bodies. Kneeling down, the guy took a closer look at the corpses, noticing they were all fatally wounded by stab wounds, from a blade similar in length to a sashimi knife. Putting out his cigarette in the pool of blood, he picked up his phone and called his employer. His boss reminded him he had already said not to call at that hour. The man asked if he had a meeting later. He advised that the best choice would be to cancel the appointment. After all, the assassin who killed Director Kim might be after him. The man, sipping his wine, calmly asked what was going on. His subordinate explained that he had gone to the security company and found them dead from the injuries. It looked like a solo attack. Besides the assassin not being ordinary, it was very likely he knew exactly where the meeting would be held. But his boss said that an emergency family meeting was a tradition in the Chingu group, asking if his subordinate really believed someone would invade a meeting known only to family members. He said he sent him so he could hunt that man. Discreetly lost in thought, the man realized the wounds from that knife reminded him of something. Remembering the protagonist asking for a cigarette from his hands as he took the cigarette, stating that if he doesn't use knives, there's no way he could have gotten all those scars on his palms. That in mind, when man asks his boss if there's anyone in his family who's good with knives, laughing, the man says, those people can barely slice an apple. Besides, everyone is present except for the children. So he offers another 100 million for Homan to guard the place and ensure its safety leaving the office. Homan says he'll go to the meeting. Still, he asks for the security to be reinforced. Annoying, his boss just says he understands, handing his phone to another employee. A man mutters that that lunatic is just a gangster and still thinks he can give him orders. As he walks down the hallway, he straightens himself up and gets ready for the meeting. Arriving at the meeting, he greets his boss and asks when the president arrived. Talking on the phone, Human informs the leader of his gang that he plans to help the and who group for one more day. Before returning, however, he's called a traitor. Instead of getting angry, he asks if his boss has been drinking. He explains that they offer him another 100 million for the job, claiming only an idiot would turn it down. Also, there seems to be a dangerous assassin on the loose. He notices the protagonist hiding in the alley. Quickly, Wayman ends the call and says he'll explain the details later. Looking toward the boy, feigning casualness, he asks if one cigarette wasn't enough. Taya says that finding someone of his caliber near the site of the incident isn't a coincidence, claiming it was a good idea to follow him. Smiling, the man says it's been one hell of a day. First someone bums his cigarette, then follows him around. He admits he can't believe he didn't notice him, saying, "It's the first time something like that has happened." Walking toward him, the protagonist says that before they begin, he'd like to ask one thing. He asks whether the man is working with the Chi and Gu group. On the other hand, Wyman asks if he wasn't listening to the conversation, saying he's just helping them temporarily. At that, the boy gives him a deadly stare. He draws the two daggers from his back, and then immediately clashes his blade against the enemy's weapon. They exchange glances, sizing up each other's skill. Thus begins a frenzied exchange of blows. However, Wyman jumps into the air, rising above the protagonist, swings his weapon to strike. To be surprised, his bat is sliced into pieces. Seeing that, the gangster wonders when that even happened. What's more, Taha had vanished in the blink of an eye. Then, his opponent grows anxious as he realizes something. The positions had flipped, and now the one in the air was the protagonist, who quickly prepares to end the battle. With a touch of fear, Human admits that she and Gu got themselves into serious trouble, this time wondering how they became targets of a monster like that. Taita falls toward his opponent. Wielding his blades, gangster doesn't know what to do. Now that he's without a weapon, the protagonist lands a blow, knocking the man to the ground, already getting ready to leave. While wiping the excess blood from his knife, he heads for the exit of the alley, leaving Human's body lying there. However, to his surprise, the man asks if the boy is joking. Even wounded, he still wasn't dead. He asks if even after all that, the protagonist is really just going to walk away, stating that he'll regret letting him live. Sheathing his dagger, Taha explains that he has his own principles, warning that if he were with the Chin-Hu group, he'd already be dead, that the man should stay out of his way. Otherwise, the next time he hears in helping his enemies, he won't be so kind. Besides, if he can't accept the fact that he was spared, he can just take it as payback for the cigarette. Still lying on the ground, Human smiles as he realizes that a simple cigarette saved his life, admitting that this time it was very cheap. A little later, car speeds down the street. Obviously, the protagonist was the one driving. For some reason, he seemed both irritated and in pain, seeing a wound around his waist. Taha says that at least the cut wasn't deep. While driving, he says that at least he can still move. He steps on the gas. He only needs 32 minutes. He says that finally, the revenge he planned for 17 years will come to fruition, with only 32 minutes to go until its completion. Once again, the boy is consumed by memories from his childhood. His mother begs him not to look, while his father uses his body to shield them both from the bullets. However, extremely scared and worried, runs toward his father. The man asks what she's doing, telling his wife to grab the boy and run. So his mother picks Taha up so they can try to get away. But then the ship starts shaking violently. Even the assassins struggle to keep their balance. His mother puts the boy outside the door. She tells her son to find a life vest and jump into the water with a smile. Hujong says he must survive. One of the men says it's annoying and reminds them, he said, to detonate the bombs only after killing everyone. Looking in his direction, the protagonist is surprised they speak Korean. The man's face was completely covered with a mask and goggles as he aimed at him and his mother. Huijun panics and tells Taha to run as fast as he can. The boy starts running frantically through the ship. Terrified, the child was overwhelmed with fear. He runs gasping while crying uncontrollably. After that earlier explosion, part of the yacht was already on fire. But then another bomb goes off. Because of this, the ship starts to sink even faster. Back to the present in the secret annex in Gangbuk, the CEO of the Chingu Group's department store asks if they really found the person who killed Director Kim. However, Jason says it was probably a crime of passion. After all, the director had 2 mistresses in secret. His sister says that's disgusting, but he replies that it's ironic, coming from someone who has several lovers. John Won asks what Director Kim's role was in the company's share quota, stating they'll need to make an announcement soon. But suddenly someone slams their hand on the table, catching everyone's attention. The man tells everyone to be quiet. Google tells his son to speak. John says 2 employees were found at the scene, but they didn't have much to say and were dismissed. Also, it was confirmed there were no other witnesses. Man says they were just subcontractors, so they don't know much in general. And the police ensure the incident wouldn't leak. Suddenly his father throws a glass of wine at his head. Everyone at the table is left confused by what just happened. The old man asks where the Ojang gang is. Chong was visibly irritated by that. Even so, he smirks and says they don't seem to know anything, even sending Human their seventh in command. Still, the old man smashes a bottle on his son's head. He says that even after 24 hours, he hasn't found out who the killer is or where he is. Instead, he brings news about a gang. He says that if the former president in Suyak hadn't died 17 years ago, someone as incompetent as him would never have stepped foot there. Along with the wine, the man's face was now completely covered in blood. Regardless of what happened, Chum assures that he'll find him within the next 12 hours. The rest of the family sees that neither of them has changed, and it bothers them all. Juvia asks why he's so harsh with the eldest. After all, he's still his firstborn. However, her brother says it's not out of hate, stating that it's definitely out of fear. Grabbing a cloth, Shang immediately asks his subordinate for his phone. While wiping his face, he searches for something on his phone. He asks where his men are. His assistant says they're already ready. The guy says it's exciting, saying he's eager to see how big this entrance will be. On a highway at night, the protagonist was heading toward his goal. Taeyong admits he's always kept an eye on the Chingu group. 17 years ago, the day he was accepted into the Salerno family. Even before his grandfather's funeral, Gua became the new chairman, taking over all the shares and seizing the position, taking advantage of the chaos from the failed war on crime, and forming alliances with factions, like the Ocean Gang, to grow his power. Even though that was the beginning of the Qianhu era, still hold meetings with official members. During moments like this had been an old family tradition. Since the days when his grandfather was still alive, neither the system nor the traditions had changed. Everyone had killed to reach their positions within the hierarchy created by Suko, willing even to murder their own parents and him. One of the guards was monitoring the cameras, wondering whose car that was approaching. He asked his superior if the members are expecting any guests, but this is denied. He reports that there's a car heading toward the front gates also. It doesn't seem to be slowing down. Seeing that it's probably some lunatic, the head of security orders the barriers to be raised. With that some containment, stakes begin to rise from the ground. However, the protagonist accelerates even more. After all, he doesn't need tricks up his sleeve to take down people who have been protected their entire lives. Taking off his belt, Theo says there's no point in making elaborate plans. His car's front end is completely destroyed from the impact. Even so, he leaps out with his blade in hand. He states that the only thing he hopes is that they haven't forgotten about his family, so he can say it to all of their faces. The security guards look at the intruder in fear. The boy quickly takes down all of them in a single attack and declares that he's back. Confused, they ask what that loud noise was. They question why it keeps getting louder. Moreover, it seems to be coming from the front gate. Unlike the other, Sean looked confused but confident. His uncle tells the guy to go over there and check out what all the commotion is about. However surprising, John 1, he says there's no need. All the guards who were inside the hall point their weapons at the family members. The oldest of the sisters asks, "What's going on?" Guho, irritated, asks if they're seriously trying to mess around. At a time like this, however, his son calmly stands up while wiping his mouth. The old man asks if he's really going to go through with it. With a smile, Chung claims that his father always expected this to happen. Sooner or later, that was the reason. His father was always angry with him because he was afraid he'd end up like his grandfather. And with a terrifying look, the madman says that after all, the one who killed his grandfather and uncle was him. Meanwhile, the protagonist passed through the gates, saying that his revenge was finally about to begin. The guards point their weapons, asking if this is some kind of ambush. Jason asks if his nephew has gone mad. They question what the guy is doing, claiming that he should never point a weapon at his own family. However, Chung states that he's not doing anything. Still, they keep cursing him and saying it's clear what he's trying to do. looking at one of the guards. Julie asks if he's really going to betray them. For that kid, even though he was her personal bodyguard. Youngman apologizes, making it clear he's abandoning her. Even the second son's bodyguard says, "It's nothing personal. But the rewards for betrayal just too tempting." On the other hand, one of them says that, if they had at least gotten a raise, none of this would be happening. The only person who remains silent is Chong's own bodyguard. The guy's father says he can understand the others betraying them, but he doesn't understand why his own son would do this. He asks if his own guard will really turn his back on them guns, who simply watches without moving or saying a word. The man says he isn't paid to protect him personally, but rather the Chien Gu group. John 1 asks if the guards really think they'll gain anything. By doing this, he tries to keep threatening them. But a gun is placed against his head. His own bodyguard kills him in cold blood. With that, the two remaining brothers become desperate and beg for mercy. However, gunshots echo through the hall. As blood spreads everywhere, John hands the cloth to his subordinate, walking calmly toward his father. The old man admits he already expected something like this to happen someday. Ever since the day his other son died of acute leukemia, and shortly after that his wife asked for a divorce, without wanting a single cent. Trembling with rage, he says he always suspected Sean was behind everything, and because of that always kept his distance. Spinning the gun, the guy says that, for someone who ordered the deaths of his own father and brother, Guvo talks too much. Putting the gun to his head, the man asked the old man who it was that sent his father and brother out to sea. He asks what else he could have done if he hadn't killed everyone. Suyak's son would have inherited the presidency, and they would have never made it this far. The psychopath comes closer and asks why his father never declared him the future successor. The old man becomes more and more terrified by it all. On top of that, his son was staring at him with a frightening look, while Google claims that if he had done that, the boy would have killed him even sooner. He doesn't deny that he would have killed him earlier, but says he's a little upset to hear it out loud. His father assures him that even if he kills him right there, he will never become president. But Chong interrupts, saying he already knows that, after all, power transfers through political or violent coups aren't recognized. That's a clause made by the committee. Because of that, the guy says, it's a shame, he explains, that the person making all that noise outside isn't one of them. The president asks who it would be as he shoots his father. He explains that it's a young master who waited 17 long years for this day. The guards were firing at the intruder. They tried to surround him. Since the assassin didn't have a firearm, the protagonist remembers that the Central Security Force is made up of those who protect the executive members, so they hold high-ranking positions. Therefore, he assumes the bodyguards will be much stronger than the ones before. He stops running for a moment, changing the direction of his charge. The boy says this won't be a problem. He starts moving toward the enemies in a zigzag pattern to dodge the bullets, using one of the guards' bodies as a shield. Desperately, the man begs them not to shoot since he'll get hit, but the guards don't care and open fire, leaving one of the security men terrified. His weapon is cut in half. In an instant, Taha is able to defeat them all quickly. The leader orders his men to evacuate the president as fast as possible. However, the protagonist throws his dagger at the guy still. One guard manages to intercept the blade. A man with glasses asks why they're making all that noise, questioning if they can't do this quietly. 3 department heads show up to try to stop him, but that little group is simply ignored as the protagonist kills the others. One of them says he can stop him alone and tells his comrades to stand back. However, even though he's extremely strong, Taha is struggling with the wound he received earlier. With each passing minute, the wound seems to be getting worse. Snapping back to reality, he realizes his opponent's fist is already dangerously close to his face, so his only option is to block the attack. As he's thrown backward, he manages to regain some balance, but unexpectedly a shadow looms above him. The man asks how he dares attack that place and worse, gets distracted while invading his territory. However, the protagonist agrees and says, "There's no time to be distracted by wounds," launching a strike straight at the man's chest, startling his companions as they witness the sudden defeat. Quickly Taya throws his remaining dagger at the two who are left. Neither of them looked as confident as before. Surprisingly, the intruder had already landed a hit on the man, who had defended against his ranged attacks. Shiloh can barely keep up with him with his eyes. Grabbing one of the knives he had thrown earlier, the protagonist slices off the head of the last department head. Thanks to that, he had defeated all the outside guards. As he walks for the entrance, he spots his second dagger, picking it up calmly as if no one else were there, wiping off the excess blood. He admits it took longer than expected. Even so, the place is eerily quiet. He wonders whether they escaped through a secret passage he didn't know about without knowing what awaits him. The boy begins to walk through the house, finally arriving at the room where everyone was dead, and only Chong remains seated amidst the blood. He welcomes him. He also congratulates him for making it that far, asking if he wants to sit down to catch his breath and rest a little. Seeing all that, even a protagonist doesn't quite understand what's going on, observing Jason's body with a bullet wound in the middle of his forehead. The same goes for his aunt, Ju Hui. Even John Won had met the same fate. The current president was also dead. Standing up, his cousin says he's in better shape than he expected, claiming that modern assassins should take better care of themselves. Formally greeting him, Chung asks if he recognizes him. On the other hand, the protagonist simply says the man's name and mentions that he's Guho's eldest son. Laughing, the madman says he doesn't remember them being so close, that he called his father by his first name. Suspicious, Tiana simply observes that strange behavior. His cousin says he stayed there because he thought it would be disrespectful not to greet him, and also because he needs to explain a few things, informing him that if he doesn't want to sit, they can remain standing, since it won't take long anyway. Sean asks if the boy remembers that day 17 years ago, the day he was rescued by the Italian mafia. Interrupting him, his bodyguard says that the helicopter is ready, saying they should leave soon, as it's too dangerous to stay. Annoyed, the guy says he had asked her to only call him once he was done talking. However, Tahat is suddenly surprised by something, clearly showing he wasn't expecting that at all, saying he recognizes that voice. The voice of the one who killed his family 17 years ago, remembering the man who pointed a rifle at him and his mother, the person who complained about the early explosions, while laughing beneath the mask. Extremely angry, Taha asks if he was that worm. The madman begins trying to hold back his laughter, and there's not much left to say, telling the protagonist to stop talking to him so casually after all. Is making him feel like killing him. Charging forward, he dares the guy to try, since his goal from the beginning was to wipe out the whole family. But his cousin starts saying, there's a saying that goes when in Korea, act like a Korean, telling him to change his speech. Annoyed, Taiga starts trying to understand what exactly is going on. Realizing that Chong knows he survived 17 years ago, and also knows about him being a Salerno assassin, he wonders why he waited until his return, minus 17 years after the event, to make his move. Try and get the boy's attention. The guy asks him to really listen, saying he's about to begin. Only then does Tyler realize that the madman doesn't want to pull off a coup. He wants to blame him for the attack, claiming he led it, so that he can successfully take the presidency. Johnny Oak tells the young master that they don't need introductions. The protagonist simply raises his dagger. The bodyguard starts shooting at the boy. However, the assassin manages to deflect all of them, using his blade to redirect the path of the projectiles, quickly closing the distance between them. However, another guard lands a harsh blow on the boy, even though he knew there would be more. He couldn't predict the strike. Unlike the other, the man introduces himself as Juno Park, avoiding being cornered. The young master swiftly moves back, stopping in front of his opponents. Wasting no time, Yunia begins shooting at him again, admitting that he's faster than the rumors claimed. He could dominate track and field if he went pro. His partner blocks the protagonist's escape. Even he gets a little nervous about the situation. Juno asks if flexibility is the young master's secret to success, quickly launching a frantic series of attacks. Tae realizes they are strong, completely different from the ones he fought outside. However, if it weren't for that injury, he might even be able to fight them without issue. Noticing that Sean seems to have let his guard down, and that this might be the only chance before guard, Jumpsu arrives besides. If the woman beside him is Diane. There are 3 guards in the room, yet there were 4 members at the meeting. Unexpectedly, his thoughts are interrupted, as Juno prepares to attack him. Thanks to the reflection in his opponent's pupil, Taha identifies the 4th guard. Yaman was holding a sword, preparing to strike him from behind. To the surprise of them both, he vanishes between the two. They can't understand how that's even possible. Kneeling on the ground, the protagonist realizes this must be the last one. The guy complains about being reflected, blaming Juno. But his companion says that if it were that easy, the boy would already be dead. Reloading his weapons, Journiak says he can barely imagine the bonus they'll get if they kill that guy. So both he and the guard with glasses use their weapons to shoot at the assassin. Seeing that situation, Chung says out loud that it's hard to follow a fight that involves both range and close combat, noting that they were trained specifically to defeat him, since rumors of his inhuman speed circulated through Interpol. Admitting he even thought about killing him with a bomb, of the story of him dying in a battle would bring him greater fame. Juno positions himself in front of the boy, intending to stop him from escaping. Johnny Oak says it doesn't matter how fast he is. It's all over now that Taha has been cornered. With that, the guard uses his brass knuckles to try to land a blow. The protagonist didn't have much to do, only watching the attack coming at him. His cousin thanks him for the show, while smiling malevolently. After being struck by the enemy's fist, he slammed against the wall, causing it to crack entirely. Flashing back to 4 years ago, Regina was scolding him and asking what the hell that was sank. She told him to take care of the traitor, not use him as paint for the walls. Even she started vomiting upon seeing the scene. Still yelling, the woman says that with his speed, he could have done it silently. Recalling the day they saved him, she says she understands his anger, since Lorenzo always treated him well. But killing someone like that will only spark a thirst for revenge. That's why, as his mentor and spokesperson for the Salerno family, Regina asks him never to do something like that again. However, the protagonist didn't seem happy or remorseful. Still, he says that this way people will never forget. Confused, she asks what Taha is talking about. He explains that if they kill traitors silently, their deaths won't serve as examples, saying that everyone needs to know what awaits them if they betray the family. Rumors must spread in exaggerated and distorted ways, thus gradually reducing the number of traitors, because otherwise it'll always be an endless battle. The woman asks if he chose the path of violent deaths to prevent greater bloodshed. Aside from where he was standing, everything around him was stained with blood. She says, it's absurd for such a thing to come from a boy, standing in the middle of a river of blood, without a single drop on his face. Interrupting her own thoughts, Regina says that apparently, being an assassin really doesn't suit him. Back to the present moment, Juno freezes, as a glint appears in the middle of his chest. The guy starts coughing up blood, while that glint keeps shining. Even Sean and his bodyguard are surprised by it. The protagonist had slashed the guy brutally. With a threatening look, he faces his other opponents. Frightened young man quickly points his weapon. However, in an instant, his eye is pierced after being struck. The man admits to himself that they underestimated this guy. Besides his speed, he's strong. Moreover, those who truly saw his skills never lived to tell what they were like. Even while showing all that ability to keep fighting, Taeho was even more injured, and his wounds were getting worse. Jumiak was desperate. No one told him his strength was this immense. However, Jun-soo appears and calls out to the woman, asking her to take the master outside, claiming he'll follow soon. Seeing that the boy is surprised, noticing that his cousin is trying to escape, he shouts the guy's name, slashing both of Jumia's weapons, and rushing toward the elevator. Sean leans his head out to see what's happening. With uncontrollable rage, Taeyong demands to know where he thinks he's going, when their standoff isn't over yet. However, blocking the entrance stood Jun-soo, who greets the young master. Taeyong is surprised to see that the president's bodyguard had arrived still. The boy leaps forward demanding he get out of his way, but surprisingly, the man stops both blades with a single hand, preparing to punch him. The older man notes that the boy has grown a lot, admitting he's impressed with that. The man lands several blows, all over the protagonist's body. Almost all of Taeyong's ribs end up fractured. Consequently, Taeyong begins to spit blood from all the damage, crushing the blades with his hand. Jun-soo declares that, unfortunately, this will be his end, landing a punch in the same spot. He sends the assassin's body flying. However, the old man is surprised to see that his clothes have been torn. Looking at his subordinate, he orders Jong-hyuk to get up, saying he knows he's fine. Nervously, he admits he thought it was over for him. The old man warns that the building will explode soon, telling him to grab his partner and leave. Lying on the ground was the protagonist, who appeared to be dead, reaching the rooftop. The president's bodyguard walks toward the helicopter. Chung asks if he completed the job. The man confirms and says he'll blow up the building as soon as they take off. Jun-soo says he'll handle the preparations for takeoff, but the man tells him to just keep the door open and get them in the air, putting on his headset. The bodyguard warns that they'll fly straight into the helicopter, so he suggests closing the door. However, the psychopath insists he needs to see it, claiming he waited too long for this moment. With that, the helicopter begins to ascend. As Chong stands in front of the door, he calmly watches as he smiles, cursing and saying he always hated that house, as he complains about how annoying and hypocritical his family was. Dylan and Junso exchanged looks. Suddenly, the madman remembers when the protagonist said things weren't over between them. With a grin, he calls him a poor child. After all, he lived for his revenge and ended up facing the same fate. He asks if they knew that the word family comes from the Latin famulus, meaning slave. Holding the detonator in his hands, he asks everyone to witness how he will change Chingu from now on completely, destroying the mansion of those secret meetings. Inside, Tae-ha was lying on the floor unconscious, still dazed. He realizes that the sound is from the helicopter and acknowledges that it's all over. Changing his mind, he declares that there's still time. Meanwhile, Chong watches the explosion, throwing the detonator down. He says they really wrap things up with a bang. As the protagonist jumps amid the flames, the lunatic says he's gonna lie down a bit, since it's so hot, ordering his subordinates to head straight to headquarters. But Taylor strikes him with his knife. However, he only manages to hit his calf. His cousin starts screaming in pain. Both guards rise, alarmed by the situation. Furious, his cousin calls him an insect and demands to know what he's doing. The protagonist asks if he really thought he could escape after destroying so many families, because he's hanging from the knife. His weight causes it to tear Chong's leg even more. As the blood gushes, Tanya says he will kill him no matter what. Dion grabs her weapon and asks her master to step back. However, the lunatic takes the pistol and says he'll do it himself, pointing the gun at his cousin. Jung asks if he really thinks he's the hero of the story, insisting that he is the main character. He calls him a thug and tells the boy to die. As he falls, Taeyong manages to avoid the fatal shots, though he is hit elsewhere. As a result, he goes into free fall. Immediately after they close the helicopter door, his bodyguard calls the hospital, reporting that they have an emergency. The protagonist was falling from an absurd height. Luckily, he crashes into a tree, slowing his descent even so. He hits his back against the wall of a house, and he lands on a truck rolling down near a stream. Someone passing by on a bicycle ends up seeing the scene. The person stops and looks toward him. It was one of the victims Tiha had rescued from the security company earlier. The guy notices that it was the man who had saved him. Given the state of his body, he wonders if he arrived too late. But then he hears a plea for help. Looking again in Tia's direction, he tries to look more carefully. The protagonist was asking for help, barely able to stay conscious, even extremely wounded. He kept saying it wasn't over yet, and kept pleading for help. On a messaging app, someone had sent an 11-minute voice message. Person was requesting backup, stating that the guy had refused the breathalyzer test 3 times and kept insisting he was Congressman Kim. That man was typing something while listening to the audio of former Director Kim, using his influence to threaten the police. He asked someone if that voice and name were clear enough. Person questioned where the director was at that moment. The young man replied he was probably at the police station, giving a statement and would soon head home. His partner seemed a bit hesitant, so the guy offered 200 and asked if that was enough to catch a big figure from the majority party for a while. The only notification was that the other person was typing, but to his surprise the counter-offer was 30. Naturally, he was extremely frustrated, claiming that it was worth way more. However, the buyer said that it wasn't even election season, so no one cared about those old men. So the guy said it seemed like the buyer didn't understand the current market, explaining that a regular person was worth 1x, a celebrity 10x. But if it was someone related to Chingu, the value was 1,000 times higher. Taking a deep breath, he realized everything revolved around the Chingu. After some time, the radio reported an accident at a tower. Not interested in that information, the guy turned the radio off. He was getting ready to leave, but instead of heading to the street, he was in a restaurant. The owner was already getting things ready to open. The woman warned the boy that he'd be late. If he stayed there, the boy said he was fine and would make it on time if he went by skateboard, so she told him to eat something. However, if he did, he really would be late suddenly. Someone appeared and said that this chef should stop playing games. Guy entered saying the owner should sell the place. Before they stopped being polite, Baksu asked the boy if he agreed with him. The lady questioned if they were already there in the morning to collect money, claiming that delinquents really knew how to stay busy. She told the boy not to worry and to head to school, saying nothing would change anyway. Even though he was irritated, there was nothing he could do. Grabbing a knife, the thug said she shouldn't say those things so quickly, claiming she was already 2 months late. The guy told the woman to sell the building and gather as much as she could, stating that their interests aligned. She said she'd never sell that place for crumbs, telling him to at least learn basic arithmetic before coming back. Meanwhile, the kid was at his station waiting for his transport. Exhausted from it all, he just sighed. Unsure of what to do, he admitted that in his district, the fights over redevelopment were out of control, with disputes between groups like Xingu and Ojang. It was a very neglected area, turning into a lawless land, where small gangs tried to exploit the people living there. People like him and that lady had nowhere else to go. Upon returning, the restaurant owner had several bruises on her face. Still, she just asked him to clean the tables. Worried, he asked her what happened to her face. A customer said he saw some Yabari men leaving earlier. Visibly upset, the man said they were probably trying to pressure people into selling their buildings for redevelopment. She told him not to worry and asked the kid to put his backpack in the back of the shop. The boy did as she asked, but angrily threw everything aside. Frustrated, the boy muttered that he really needed to do something. He remembered that before his father passed away, Dr. Yang Suk was a close friend of his. She had once been a professor at a medical school, but crossed paths with the Ocean Gang. Still she took care of him. None of it was her fault, just like with the restaurant, even if her food was good, and the dishes always well made. Interrupting his thoughts, an idea came to his mind. He recalled what that guy told him on the phone. After all, someone from the Chingu group was worth 1,000 times the normal value. So the boy messaged him again. The guy asked if he had any news. Even though he was nervous, the boy told him everything he knew, sending some images that proved his story, claiming that one of the security guards of Chinese director's Juhak was hooking up with Mio, the leader of ladies. Still very afraid, he waited for the buyer's response. Not quite understanding, the guy asked what the boy wanted with that info, but quickly remembered the values mentioned earlier. The next day was a sunny Saturday. Some men in suits approached and asked if he was gray. He confirmed, but as he looked back, he immediately realized he shouldn't have done that. The guy punched him in the stomach, knocking him out and taking him to a van. As he was being taken, Gray finally understood why they paid so much. After all, it was just bait. The boy was tied up and sitting inside the security company's office. The leader said that at first, he thought he was just an annoying informant, but in reality the kid was very good. He asked where he got those images, wondering if his father had hidden them before dying. The guy asked if the brat was Jingu's son, one of the people who reported Shingu. Seeing that, Gray gave a slight smile. Taking off his watch, the guy asked if he thought it was funny. Then he punched the boy in the face, asking if that was funny too. Still hitting him, the man asked if he had more files like that one, hurting the boy more and more, throwing him to the ground and cursing him non-stop. Even so, Gray couldn't hold back his laughter and kept laughing. Still laughing, he said, "The old man looked like a piece of trash. He uses as a toilet," claiming that if he had more, he would have already sold them. The fat guy ordered his men to bring the hammer man. Threatens to rip out all of the boy's teeth until he understands that this isn't a game. But luckily for him, one of the guards calls the old man. His subordinate reports that a central dispatch order just came, in stating that they need to provide security for an emergency meeting standing up. And he says that if it's really a level 1 priority, that means they should go right now. So he orders them to tape the boy's mouth and lock him in the room, kicking him inside. The fat man says he'll be back to finish this later. Inside there was already an elderly man, along with a woman still on the floor. He says his father was a fool, driven by his ridiculous sense of justice. He didn't even try to expose Chingu. He just died in a car accident with his mother, and instead he should have just gone into hiding, to live a peaceful life working for them. No matter how significant the information his father had, as long as he remained defenseless, it would all be in vain. However, they begin to hear the guards asking who that person was. Gunfire and screams suddenly mix together. Even the leader panics, shouting for his men to kill the intruder. Everyone starts to panic, not knowing what's happening. Suddenly the large door in front of them bursts open. The protagonist hands them a knife and tells them to use it to free themselves and get out of there. Then he assures them that none of the three ever saw him there. They don't fully understand what just happened, and they start to leave, thanking him for the help. That's when the boy looked around and behind him, one last time staring at the bodies. Gray wonders if that man did all of this by himself. Sometime later he finally returns home. Young Suk asks what happened to his face, and where he had been all that time. She gets more and more upset, demanding he explain, but Gray says nothing happened. With a smile, girl tells her not to worry. The boy heads to his room. The woman watches him, clearly concerned. As soon as he enters his room, he collapses onto the floor. Still shaken, the boy wonders if it was the Ocean Gang that sent that man there. After all, they had guns. But even so, he killed them with just 2 knives, as if it didn't matter. While opening his drawer to search for something, the boy keeps wondering if that guy was sent by someone. Closing it, he figures there might be something more behind all of this. suspecting it might be a revenge plot. He remembers the moment. The department head mentioned his father, questioning if he had more files related to Chingu. The boy admits that, no matter how important the information is, it's worthless unless you have the power to use it. As he accesses the files, Gray says he needs power. The man says it's practically impossible to find him among those folders just by his face. But then, he remembers something one of the subordinates said when he mentioned an emergency meeting. With that, he remembers the Level 1 priority code, accessing the Chingu Partnership Directive. Seeing that, it was also noted among his father's folders. He says he finally found it. It's stated that in the event of a significant incident, the executive members would begin a meeting at the Bugeg Mountain Annex. However, even with all that information, the actual location wasn't provided. Giving up, Gray says he doesn't care anyway. He doesn't even know that guy. Even so, he says, not everyone who considers Kyan-gu is considered by them in return. On the police radio, the massacre Taha was committing is reported, with multiple confirmed victims. The extent of the damage is unknown, but it's confirmed that the mansion was secretly used by Chingu executives. Getting up, the boy realizes it can only be that man, so he decides to go there, grabbing his bike and leaving in the middle of the night, even though he doesn't know who that person is, nor his reasons for doing all of this. The best decision he can make right now is to go there. That's when he saw someone hanging from a helicopter. After following the sound of gunshots and screams, the boy went in the direction where the person might have fallen. However, upon seeing him in that state, he thought the man was dead. Seeing that blade in his hands and his cry for help, he mimics his face as he declares that it's not over. Gray is shocked by all that strength of will. Sometime later, he arrives home screaming for his adoptive mother. As always, she was working. Alarmed, the woman asks who that is and what happened to him. Desperate, the boy begs Yang Suk to save that person. Time passes, the protagonist is already better, and asks who he is and why he was saved. Gray introduces himself, and says he buys and sells information, claiming that he's been looking for something specific, lately saying that he hoped to find someone like him. Doubting his words, the protagonist asks if someone like him could really be a data broker. The boy continues, saying he's more like a wholesale information dealer, always providing great intel to his clients. Besides that, his main clients are other info merchants in the financial sector of Uedo. He explains that he nearly died after falling into the Chim-gu's trap, thinking he was about to meet a fellow informant. Taeyong asks if the boy was one of the hostages from that day, wondering if he was able to recognize him, even after seeing him just once. Ray confirms he did, saying he wants to win an award for the youngest data broker, or something like that. With that, the protagonist starts looking around, noticing the things the boy owns. Then he asks how many days he's been there, and the boy tells him it's been 4 days. The man wonders if he really slept that long. Still, he calls for Gray and asks if this supposed broker could find someone for him. But unfortunately, he has to admit he was bluffing, saying it was hard enough just finding him, and he'd need another broker for that. Moreover, finding someone requires a lot of money, and above all, he'd like to ask for something in return for saving him, since he spent a lot on medical expenses. Ignoring all the rest, the protagonist asks if what the boy's trying to say is that he can't find him. Gray asks what the man would do if he couldn't. However, Tana just turns his back and says it's fine. Grabbing his jacket, he thanks the boy for his help, and says he'll erase him once everything's settled. The boy asked if he's really leaving just like that, but the protagonist says he still has matters to take care of. As her final piece of advice, she tells the boy not to interfere or try to stop him, since this won't end with just one kidnapping. Scared, Gray just sits back down in his chair, but soon he smiles, realizing that apparently that's how things work. After leaving the boy's room, he notices a strong smell of pork, and wonders if that place is a restaurant. Surprising, Tae Young-suk says the boy shouldn't be up yet. She says he was hit by 22 caliber bullets, making it possible to stitch him up. But his fractures aren't kept still. He'll be lost even if a doctor helps him again. Politely thanking her, the protagonist says she must be the doctor who saved him, and assures her he'll repay her. But she says she's not a doctor, claiming she owns a gogbab restaurant, and asks him not to come back there if his stitches open, so the protagonist heads outside. Looking around, he wonders if this is a market. Ignoring these things, Tenga picks up a phone. Answering it, he says it's not his phone. Gray explains he's broke, and until it's fixed, you can keep that one, he says. There should also be a box in his pocket with earbuds, asking the protagonist to use them, taking the device to have his surprised by its size. The kid explains about the battery connection and mic, also warning that the first button on the shirt is a camera. The protagonist says he was very clear, claiming the boy will die if he gets involved with him. However, to his surprise, the boy asks why he's exterminating the Shinbu family. The kid asks him not to be surprised. After all, even though Korea is a mess, something like that wouldn't go unnoticed. No, the whole country went into chaos, while he was unconscious, with news saying the entire Chingu family was a victim of terrorism. Taeyong asks why the boy wants a favor from him, even knowing that. The kid explains that in that neighborhood, there are a lot of power struggles between Ojang and Chingu to gain redevelopment rights. Besides the two gangs getting closer to that area, there are many other issues making life harder. Even so, since the protagonist's problem seems more urgent, he'll help, but in return, he wants help in the future, until everything is resolved. They can't lose contact, but if Taeyong refuses, he'll have to hand him over to Chingu. Obviously the man doesn't like that at all. However, he says he wants to see what the brat is made of. Sometime later, he's already walking through a busier area, heading to a fancy building. Taeyong had gone to a kind of bank, or he had a private vault there. He opens one of the drawers looking for something. Gray admits he didn't know a company like that existed in Seoul, asking if they could be tracked through it. But the protagonist explains that these companies work based on trust, so they would never consider making deals with other businesses. He says people usually go there to hide jewelry or sins, making it the safest place possible. Seeing this, the boy realizes that this guy is apparently prepared to go undercover. He gets thoughtful watching his actions, since the assassin didn't have any firearms, and a knife wouldn't be enough. Many drops of sweat start to fall to the floor. His body was getting heavier, making it hard to keep a neutral face, and also feeling like he was being stabbed. Feeling the same as when Regina used to beat him, the protagonist asks if the boy found the guy he asked him to look for. He asks if the CEO of the company, Night Move Piljun, is the broker who helped him enter Korea. Apparently he worked in Europe, became famous in the field, and is now looking for a smuggling ship to go to China. Greg explains that border pressure increased after the man did what he did to the Chungju family. Protagonist tells the boy to announce to the merchants that a ship is available, with rates 10 times higher than normal. His companion asks what he'll do when he finds that guy, wondering if Taehail wants to leave with him. Putting his knives back in their sheaths, he says he's going to kill him. The reason he almost died that day was because someone leaked his information. The only one who knew where he was Piljon coldly. The protagonist says that traitors must die. Later in a church, he admits he doesn't care. It's a long-time friend or not. A hooded figure enters the chapel. Approaching the confessional, the man calls for the priest and asks if they could talk, using a specific phrase. Each brings water to their own mill. Piljong complains about how stuffy that place is, questioning why they're meeting in a sacred location. He says it might not seem like it, but even so, he's a devout Catholic. However, the so-called priest only asks where the money is. The informant reaches into his bag for the money, showing the 100 million won. The man says it would have been more profitable to exchange that for $10,000, changing the subject. Piljin says he needs to know something. After all, the country is full of frauds like him, so we can't trust the priest. Gray warns that there are many men outside. Suddenly several people enter holding melee weapons. The man says, "It's very strange that someone managed to get a ship that not even he, a person who works with information, could find," claiming that the rule in that line of work is clear. If someone lies, they must pay with their life, admitting that the protagonist must be ready to face the consequences of his actions, but leaving the man startled. Theo says he could hardly believe that. He wouldn't recognize his own friend's voice. Tiljin can't believe what he's hearing, saying they had assured him they had killed him. The man quickly realizes there's no point in talking. Even so, he claims he was a fool and should have suspected something. As soon as he noticed, the password was an Italian expression, trying to explain himself. His friend says he lost everything because of gambling, ended up in Korea, and racked up massive debts in Chingu's casinos. As he reaches for his weapon, Tiljong tries to convince him that he wouldn't have said anything if he'd known they would try to kill him. But before he can finish his sentence, Tiha bursts through the confessional wall and drives a blade through his throat. He panics, trying to stop the bleeding in his neck. Men outside ask what's going on. Through the camera on the protagonist's shirt button, it was possible to see the man's body and all the blood that had spread. Obviously, Gray is terrified, despite all his injuries, enough to make most people barely able to walk. Taeho was still going to fight. Leaving the booth, the protagonist says that Piljun surely ordered them not to bring firearms to avoid conflicts. The psychopath tells everyone to pray before they begin, asking them to inform God that they'll soon be with him, stating that it doesn't matter whether they're hired hands or subordinates of his friend. Gray didn't know what to do, seeing all that the protagonist says, that just the fact they're armed with bats and knives is enough for him to consider them a threat to his life in that case. There's no reason for him to hold back. They ask what that guy can even do with a broken arm. One of them charges to strike, saying that apparently there's money in the confessional. The protagonist simply prepares to take them down. The boy admits that the assassin's broken arm isn't the only issue, as he has fractured ribs and gunshot wounds. However, he moves smoothly as he dodges the attack, and with a single motion, he pierces the back of his opponent's neck. Already shifting to attack the next one again, he dodges the blow while slashing the man's throat. Quickly, he throws a dagger into another man's neck. One of them runs in to try and stab him. However, John Wick uses the sling to immobilize the enemy. In a flash, he lands an elbow strike with his other arm. With that, Tiha had defeated everyone who came at him. In an instant, he explains that when someone gains the upper hand, in the beginning, it's hard for the opponents to keep their composure. Considering all that money waving in front of their eyes, it was obvious adrenaline would take over. Even so, among them, there was still someone else. Someone had something they shouldn't. But some of those guys charge at him. The protagonist takes a simple step forward, and in doing so disappears before everyone's eyes. Using his speed, he rushes past the men. Obviously, his target was to eliminate the one most capable of hurting him. The two who had stepped up to attack him are completely confused. Yu and Gray can't understand what just happened. With that, the weapon drops to the ground. After his rush, he calmly starts turning to the others, asking who's next despite all that chaos outside. The church didn't seem affected. In the parking lot, only one car was parked at that hour. Gray was inside, unable to believe what he had just seen. Supposing that man doesn't even seem human, since even with a battered body, he still did all that suddenly. Tiha calls out to the boy and asks if he can hear him. The protagonist asks the kid to go to the confessional and retrieve a bag of money, since he no longer has the strength for it. The brat asks, frightened, what he's talking about, but the man says he knows he's in the area. And after all, he warned him about the men before they even showed up. Gray doesn't know what to say in that situation. Even a bit nervous, he simply accepts the mission. So the boy gets out of the vehicle and heads toward the church. With that, the boy walks up to the door He opens the doors in front of him. The church was completely stained with blood and bodies. Sitting on one of the pews was the protagonist. He says he's up there even more nervous. Gray begins to walk, arriving at the booth. He notices the body of the protagonist's former friend. He feels a bit sick after all. There were bodies scattered all over the place. The boy says he called a cab, saying it should arrive in the next 10 minutes. However, looking at his companion, the boy realizes Taha is in really bad shape. He asks what's wrong with him, saying he'll call Yang Suk and ask her to prepare some medicine for them. But the madman stabs his phone. At that moment, Gray is frozen in fear, taking off a glove. The protagonist says that when he woke up, his clothes and phone had been changed. But the strangest part was that his gloves were still on. His hands, obviously. The boy just listens without saying a word. On Tanya's hand, the mark of the Salerno family was drawn. Looking at the boy, the man claims he knows who he's dealing with. Ray just nods his head, saying his name, his father's name, and the fact that he's the grandson of the late president of the Qinghu Group, is the only Asian member of the Italian Salerno Mafia, around 20 to 30 years old, with a bounty of 5.5 billion on his head. The boy insists he wasn't plotting against anyone, saying not even the lady knows, claiming he just needs his help. Kaya asks if that amount is worth more than the risk of losing his life, or earning the reward for his head. Gray tries to say that the reason he and his adoptive mother live in hiding is because of the Chingu, but the protagonist cuts him off, assuring him that the smartest choice would have been to turn him over to Chi and Gu instead of going through all of this. Recalling the conversation they had earlier, when the kid said he wanted to win a prize by becoming the youngest broker, noticing that the reason his career was stagnant, despite being capable of more, and even getting involved in the field, something nobody in the business does, is due to his lack of experience. That's why top informants are usually older. With that, he asks if Gray wants to step into a much bigger arena. A little later, in a large modern building, two people were walking down the hallway, while one of them told the other to only answer what was asked directly. Women gets upset and assures he would never say anything that could put Ojang at a disadvantage. His companion says people from the gang aren't exactly known for being well-spoken. Even irritated, the guy can't deny it. The two enter, as the man apologizes for making that person wait. Back at the chapel, Taeyong praises the boy's work, stating he'll fulfill a favor, but also wants them to work together afterward. He says Gray will be risking his life and won't have an easy death. If he's caught, however, he could become the best if they work together. The protagonist says that's a promise. After all, he will crush Chi and Gu once and for all. The leader of Ojang admits he didn't expect them to call so soon. After all, they understand that Sean must be busy with the funeral of his relatives. They affirm they wouldn't have gone anywhere before getting in touch, but the man raises his hand, signaling them to stay quiet. Both are afraid of what might happen. The strange man makes a little hand gesture, asking for silence. With that, he begins to nod his head affirmatively. A kind of speaker starts playing music. He raises his clenched fist, making a sort of resistance pose. The two members of the Ojan gang don't understand what it means. Still, someone starts clapping. The guy accompanying Human says, "It's a shame. They arrived just as the performance was ending." Shang asks if he knows that piece. The man says its exact name, but notes the composition seemed disjointed, assuming maybe it was due to his performance. That clearly doesn't please the lunatic. He orders his bodyguard to turn it off, while Diane uncovers her ears. The man says that was a 6th grade piano competition, assuming he never practiced again. Moreover, all the relatives who went to watch him that day are now dead. The man asks if they know what happened, assuring them that if they had known who was coming, they wouldn't have been so defenseless. However, Human insists he did warn them, advising they should have even cancelled the meeting, since the assassin wasn't just anyone. While saying it was Chung who didn't heed the warning, Chung cuts him off, telling him to put away that cigarette, claiming he was the one who knew best. This visibly angers him. Chung says it was a traditional emergency meeting of his family, something that couldn't be cancelled on a whim, claiming that's why he paid 200 million won for him, to deal with that man discreetly, without alerting the other members. The man rests his knee against a sort of cane while touching his leg. He says that instead of handling the assassin, they suffered losses, and now he'll even need to use that. With that, the man says he can't help but wonder how Human is still alive, even though all the other guards died. Guy says he already explained, saying that assassin kills according to his own rules, and he didn't fall within them. With a smile, the lunatic says, maybe the rule of a terrorist is to avoid friendly fire. Obviously, this infuriates Human. He tells the guy to stop barking nonsense, asking if they really think he put the honor of his organization and parents at risk. Chung says, it must be nice to have parents to support you, dating that even if you wanted. He's already 6 feet under. Suddenly, the other Ojong member adjusts his glasses, preparing to step in. The man asks, who is responsible for handling the so-called terrorist? The guy assures it shouldn't even be questioned. It was Mr. Junsu. The girl once again looks at the old man with suspicion. Women's partner asks the bodyguard directly. The man obviously confirms immediately. However, even he seems a bit suspicious. He says he understands, and asks what Sean wants from them. The limited claims he doesn't care about money or anything like that. He just wants to make sure they stay quiet about the incident, and if anyone asks. Woman has never seen the assassin before. The guy doesn't understand why. Chi and Gu are trying to bury the matter. His companion lights a cigarette, asking if that's really all they want. Chiyoung tries to make him put the cigarette out again, but Johnson touches his shoulder. Startled, the man looks at his bodyguard, who speaks in his place, and assures both that it will be enough. The Ojon representative says he needs some time to digest everything, asking if the bodyguard would also like a cigarette, but the man thanks him and says he's quit the habit. However, Chung slams the table, getting increasingly furious. He asks if they're not afraid. After all, he'll be the new president soon, questioning what that old worm is doing. The guy strings together insults and tells that little shit to know his place. Standing up, he says that's what his boss would say, and that's why he's in that seat. Bidding farewell, the man addresses the bodyguard directly, saying they agreed to the terms. Throwing the cigarette butt on the floor, the man tells them to have an ashtray next time, and preferably a wet napkin too. With that, the three are left in the room in deafening silence. Chong stays quiet for a few seconds, not saying or doing anything. Huimin says he really is something else. After all, he dismantled all of Chingu's arrogance, using only his words, adjusting his glasses again. He says that's his role there, since apparently Chong doesn't understand how things work, claiming that the former president truly taught him nothing and deserved his fate for not dealing with that brat sooner. The guy is in disbelief, asking if he's really trying to say that calmly. The old man claims the incident was probably a coup, planned by Chinam to seize the presidency. The elevator opens and they resume walking, declaring it's essential that they find the assassin who attacked the Chin group. Freeman tries to say the guy is dead, but his companion assures him that's not true. After all, Junsu is strong but never kills people. At the moment he asked the old man that he confirmed his suspicions. The guy is even more amazed by all the twists. He declares it's unlikely the man was hired by Chung, since Junsu lost many men. The assassin was merely used in the end. Hyman says that when he met him, the so-called terrorist said he hadn't been to Korea in a long time, asking if they should try to bring him to their side, maybe even managing to take Chingu down completely. However, the old man says that would be good. But even so, if they find him, they must kill him. The guy can't understand the point of everything. Earlier still, the old man admits What irritates him is the fact that Chung called him, thinking Human isn't a match for the assassin. That's why next time they meet, he must show them who's boss. Japal admits he's not the biggest fan of Ojang, but still hates seeing one of his men get beaten. Back inside, while some ice cubes fall into a container, Chung assures there's one thing. He's become very good at thanking his father. He asks if either of them wants to guess. The room still had the broken coffee table, and both bodyguards remained motionless, pouring the whiskey into the glass. The man says he's great at picking up on subtle cues. He says that when that old man asked if Tao was really dead, the room felt like everyone was holding their breath, sitting back on the couch. Chung says his bodyguard assured him he had finished off his cousin. However, Taiga jumped and injured his leg. Besides that, his body hasn't been found to this day. Bringing the glass close to his lips, he pauses for a moment with a terrifying gaze. The man questions if Taiga is still alive. Everyone, did you enjoy the story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.